A virtual unknown has exploded onto the professional cycling scene and skyrocketed directly to the top. She's young, attractive, kind, and humble, and by everyone's account, she's destined to become the top female athlete in professional mountain and gravel biking. The cycling community gathers in Texas for the next big race, eager to see if the young athlete will take it all as she's favored to do. But before the race begins, a shocking, heartbreaking, and utterly brazen series of events follows that upturns and captivates the community, the police, and everyone involved. Welcome back to Crime A to Z, where we detail cases and criminals from their very beginning until well after other reporting ends. Today, we'll be talking about the heartbreaking and hard-to-believe case of Mariah Wilson's murder. The heartbreaking part will be obvious and intense, and the hard-to-believe part will hit on multiple levels. It will make you marvel about both how someone could do such things, as well as what the perpetrator actually did and kept doing. And before we get started, if you end up liking how we present this case, we'd love it if you could quickly give us a like, share, and subscribe. We appreciate you. Let's go. Anna Mariah Wilson was born on May 18, 1996 to parents Eric and Karen Wilson. Mariah, who was fondly known as Mo, grew up in Kirby, a small town in Vermont, along with her brother Matthew. They were a small, loving family that was active and loved the outdoors. As a child, Mariah was both driven and determined. Her mother described her as having a quiet determination, and friends noted her humble, respectful confidence. From the very beginning, Mo was a perfectionist, almost to a fault. Her mother recalled how when she was in 7th grade, the head of school asked her how she was going to deal with her perfectionism. She replied that she was going to start with a clean plate. Her mother laughed, knowing her daughter meant a clean slate, but plate was so much cuter. Mo grew up near Vermont's Kingdom Trails, a mecca of trails for skiers and mountain bikers. And coming from a family of athletes, sports had a strong influence in their household. Her father, Eric, raced on the U.S. ski team, her mother, Karen, is a cycling instructor, and her aunt, Laura Wilson Todd, was a 2-time Olympic cross-country ski racer. And that was the sport that Mo gravitated toward as well. Mo attended Burke Mountain Academy, a private college prep high school in Vermont specializing in training alpine ski racers. By her sophomore year, she was ranked 3rd in the nation in giant slalom for her age group. That was the same year she tore her ACL. She recovered, and after graduating in 2014, she attended Dartmouth College and fulfilled her childhood dream of joining the Dartmouth Alpine Ski Team. She then promptly tore her ACL again. Believing in embracing adversity, she set out to tackle her injury head-on. She began cycling to rehabilitate her ACL and soon discovered a new passion. She wanted to become a professional cyclist. She graduated with a degree in engineering in 2019. And while she joined the corporate world working at the bike designer and manufacturer specialized, her off time was spent skyrocketing to the top of the professional cycling world. While Mo had done mountain biking when she was a young child, she had never done gravel cycling, which involves riding on unpaved roads of open gravel, dirt tracks, and other compositions. But within 3 years of mountain and gravel bike racing, she had become the winningest professional off-road cyclist in America, known in part for her vicious climbs.
You would kind of like peg yourself as like you enjoy the climbs, you
Yes.
enjoy a 10,000-foot day.
Yes, for sure, for sure.
Good for you. That's congratulations. Kudos.
I probably won't be thinking that when I'm out there riding tomorrow, but yeah.
While you're
right
in Black
now,
Canyon, remember you told me this, that you like those climbs.
I'll be thinking about that when I'm
Okay,
suffering,
yeah.
yeah.
Mo went from having never competed at the national level to winning or coming in second in nearly every highly competitive race she entered, unheard of for someone so new to the sport. Her trainer noted how, out of the gate, her numbers clocked in at World Cup levels. So in 2022, after over 2 years of COVID pandemic repercussions that allowed her more time to train, Mo took the leap, moved to San Francisco, and quit her full-time job so she could dedicate herself to professional racing. By everyone's account, Mo was poised to become the top bike racer in the country, possibly the world. But to be successful as a professional racer, you have to do more than just win. You need sponsors. Enter professional cyclist Kaitlin Strickland. Kaitlin was popular and well-established in the cycling community, having competed both nationally and internationally and having raced about 10 years by that point. Born November 7, 1986, Kaitlin Strickland grew up in Johnson City, Texas, on an organic farm. Mo met Kaitlin Strickland in September of 2021 at a bike race in Idaho. With Kaitlin having landed sought-after sponsors like Red Bull, Allied Cycle Works, Raffi, and more, the two connected, with Kaitlin advising her on the ropes of landing sponsorships. At the time they met, Kaitlin was dating a woman named Kaitlin Marie Armstong. Born on November 21, 1987, Kaitlin grew up in Livonia, Michigan, where she was known to be friendly, outgoing, and athletic. In high school, she was voted best hair for her class of 2005. After attending the community college, she went on to attend Eastern Michigan University. And after that, she entered the workforce in finance, then switched to being a real estate agent while also teaching yoga on the side as a certified yoga instructor. Kaitlin and Kaitlin had met on a dating app in 2019. They began an on-again, off-again relationship that would span 3 years. After they met, Kaitlin started getting into cycling, like Kaitlin. She became addicted to it and began racing on an amateur level. While they had their ups and downs, the couple continued seeing each other. Then, after the historic 2021 winter freeze in Texas resulted in Kaitlin's apartment being flooded, the couple moved in together. They also started a business together, restoring old trailers called Wheelhouse Mobile. One of the off-again periods of their relationship happened in October of that year, a month after Kaitlin met Mo. The couple had gotten into it over Kaitlin going on a mountain bike ride with Mo and some other female pro cyclists, and not inviting Kaitlin. While Kaitlin and Kaitlin were broken up, he and Mo had a brief romantic relationship. Kaitlin was also seeing other men at the time as well. Shortly after that, Kaitlin and Kaitlin decided to get back together, reverting his relationship with Mo back to a friendship and professional relationship, according to Kaitlin. Less than a year later, on May 10, 2022, 1 week shy of her 26th birthday, Mo traveled to Austin, Texas, ahead of a race that was to take place in nearby Hico, Texas, the Gravel Loca bike race. Mo was favored to win the race. She was staying at the apartment of her friend, Kaitlin Cash. Once she was settled in, Mo contacted her friend Kaitlin to see if he wanted to hang out. She texted him, "Do you have plans tonight?" He replied, "Want to go swimming? Maybe swimming and a beverage." It was a plan. The two met up a few hours later. They went swimming in a local swimming pool, then headed to a place called Pool Burger for a bite. Then Kaitlin dropped Mo back off at her friend's apartment and headed back home. But tragically, that would be the last time he would see Mo alive. That was at just after 8:30 p.m. Kaitlin Cash, the friend Mo was staying with, had been out herself that evening and arrived home about 10 p.m. to the unthinkable. She found her friend lifeless on the bathroom floor. She immediately called 911 as she began CPR. But her friend had been dead over 45 minutes by that point. Police arrived, and the news of the killing began making headlines before police divulged any identities.
Police are investigating a suspicious death in East Austin. This happened on Maple Avenue near East 17th Street overnight. A woman called police saying she found her friend inside her house unresponsive and there was blood near her. When officers arrived, they found the victim had gunshot wounds. EMS provided life-saving measures, but the woman later died from her injuries. Police do not know how long she was inside the home, but did call her death suspicious. It is unclear if a gun was found on scene.
Cash shared that the only thing she noticed missing from the apartment was Mo's racing bike. Police would later find it discarded in a bamboo patch near the apartment. Nearby surveillance footage captured a black Jeep SUV with a bike rack on the back leaving the area that evening. Once police learned that Mo was dropped off a few hours earlier by Kaitlin Strickland, they wanted to pay him a visit. Upon arrival at his home the next morning, in his driveway they noticed a black Jeep SUV with a bike rack on the back. They called him into the station and he readily agreed. Once there, he was cooperative and transparent. He shared the history of he and Mo's 1 to 2 week romantic relationship the prior year. Throughout the interview, He spoke highly of Mo Wilson and her accomplishments, referring to her as the best female cyclist in the US and possibly the world. In contrast, when he referred to Kaitlin Armstong, he described her as a participant at bike races while he was a racer. He reported that he asked her not to ride with him because she holds him back. He also shared how Kaitlin was an extremely jealous person to the point of calling Mo multiple times, telling her that Colin was her boyfriend, not Mo's, and to stay away from him. He said her jealousy was the source of countless arguments. He shared that after he and Kaitlin got back together, he continued to keep in touch with Mo professionally, but had to delete any text messages they sent and save Mo's number under a fake name to avoid conflict, since Kaitlin had blocked Mo and other women's numbers from his phone in the past. He also acknowledged that he did not disclose to Kaitlin that he was out with Mo the night of the murder, and even lied to her, telling her he was elsewhere. He told them that the Jeep in the driveway belonged to Kaitlin, but that she was not aware of where Mo Wilson was staying. And he told police that he had bought handguns for both he and Kaitlin after Kaitlin had expressed concern for her personal safety while cycling alone. So now, they want to have a talk with Kaitlin Armstong. And as luck would have it, police discover that there's an outstanding arrest warrant for Kaitlin skipping out after a Botox treatment without paying. After her procedure, she had left her maxed out credit card with an employee, saying she would get another card from her car, but she never returned. Police brought her in on that warrant. Kaitlin Armstong was not cooperative during the interview.
What were you doing yesterday?
I would like to leave, I think.
Is there any explanation as far as why the vehicle would be over there?
I would like to leave.
Typically, innocent people are eager to share their lack of involvement and clear their names, but not Armstrong. It raised law enforcement's suspicions even further. When detectives told her that her vehicle being in the area of the murder did not look good for her, she simply nodded her head in agreement, but offered no explanation as to why her vehicle would be there. And when detectives told Armstrong that Colin and Mo had gone out together on the day of the murder, she told them, "I didn't have any idea that he saw or even went out with this girl, as of recently." They suspected her involvement, but they wouldn't be able to hold her long. They were told that Armstrong's date of birth turned out to be wrong on the arrest warrant, rendering it invalid. So, without enough cause to charge her with anything else, they had to let her go. Then, within 3 days of the murder, police received calls from 2 of Armstrong's friends, both of whom said they had a conversation with Armstrong, where she was extremely angry over what she felt was a romantic relationship between Mo and Colin. One of them stated that Armstrong was to the point of shaking with anger. Both recalled her saying that she wanted to kill Mo. One of the friends recalled Armstrong saying that she had either just purchased a gun or was going to. Neither took the threat seriously, attributing it to Armstrong's extreme emotional state at the time. Despite Colin's claim that he and Mo were only involved romantically during his brief breakup with Kaitlin, evidence and statements start pointing toward more of an on-again, off-again relationship, at least around January of 2022. That is the time frame when Armstrong had the rage conversations with her friends about Colin seeing Mo. It's when she requested a gun from Strickland, and it's when Mo sent the following text to Strickland, which included, "This weekend was strange for me and I just want to know what's going on. If you just want to be friends seems to be the case, then that's cool, but I'd like to talk about it." The next day, Colin replied, "Kaitlin came along to go to a meeting about the Sprinter Spartan Hotel project. In hindsight, this was not a good idea." It appeared to law enforcement that even if Strickland saw their relationship as platonic at that time, Mo did not. What was unarguable was that Strickland's name was associated with the crime. He acknowledged as much by posting a statement on social media expressing, "There is no way to adequately express the regret and torture I feel about my proximity to this horrible crime." That proximity acknowledgement triggered several of his sponsors to promptly drop him. Based on all the findings and evidence accumulated over the next few days, as well as later court testimonies, law enforcement was able to establish a clear picture of how the evening transpired. After Mo and Colin went swimming to cool off on the 80-degree day, they stopped to eat at Pool Burger, where they were seen on the restaurant's surveillance camera. Their neutral interactions appeared to reflect the strictly platonic relationship they were having at the time, just as both Mo's family and Strickland maintain. After eating, Strickland drove Mo on his motorcycle to her friend's home. He dropped her off at 8:35 p.m., then left for home. 1 minute later, he pulls over and sends a text to Armstrong. "Hey, Are you out? I went to drop some flowers for Allison at her son's house up north and my phone died. Heading home unless you have another food suggestion. Then, a minute after that, a neighbor's Ring doorbell camera captures Armstrong's black Jeep SUV pulling up to and stopping at the home where Mo is staying. Shortly after that, the Ring camera shows the Jeep leaving. Turns out Armstrong actually did know where Mo was staying. She was using a fitness app called Strava, which cyclists use to track their bike ride data. It allowed Armstrong to track exactly where Mo was staying. Armstrong also had access to Strickland's Apple laptop login and password, and police documents speculate that she may have been reading his messages and knew exactly what the pair was up to. Evidence showed that Armstrong was actually following the pair for at least part of their outing. After Strickland dropped Mo off, Armstrong made her way into the home. She then shot Wilson twice in the head, and then a few moments later stood over her and shot her again in the heart. One of the bullets also pierced her hand, which the medical examiner determined was likely the result of Mo putting her hands up to try to shield herself. Within minutes of dropping Mo off, Strickland was seen on his motorcycle some 8 miles away, logistically clearing him from any involvement in the shooting. He'd arrived home shortly after 9:21 p.m., and Armstrong was not there. When she arrived home later that evening, she was neither frazzled nor acting strange. She did, however, aggressively initiate intimacy with him, exhibiting unusually forceful behavior that he didn't mind at the time, but, in hindsight, says he feels traumatized by. The next morning when detectives visited Strickland and he learned Mo was murdered, he was shocked. When he next saw Armstrong, he told her that he had been out with Mo. But, uncharacteristically, she was not upset. He asked her if her car was near the scene of the murder, like detectives had described, and she told him she was at a waxing appointment, a yoga class, and a healer. He said she vanished a couple of days later. Testing of the bike that was discarded near the home revealed DNA on its handlebars that highly likely matched Armstrong's. Law enforcement speculated that Armstrong either threw it there to make it look like a robbery, or she considered the bike a symbolic representation of Mo's livelihood or something dear to her, and she wanted to take that away from her. Law enforcement also discovered that on the night of the murder, Armstrong's phone was not connected to any cell network, indicating it was likely either off or in airplane mode. Police were confident it was intentional, noting that in this day and age, if your phone is either off or not connected to a network, you're likely either the victim of a crime or committing one. A silent phone actually speaks volumes. And ballistic testing revealed that the gun Strickland purchased for Armstrong had a strong likelihood of being the murder weapon. Armed with the evidence they gathered up until that point, on May 17, 6 days after the shooting and 5 days after Armstrong walked out of the interrogation, a warrant for her arrest was issued for the first-degree murder of Anna Mariah Wilson. But they were too late. Kaitlin Armstong had fled and was nowhere to be found. The day after her interrogation, Armstrong made plans. She sold her black Jeep to CarMax for $12,000, landing her a nice pot of cash. And that appeared to just be a supplement. According to Colin, prior to the murder, he had given Armstrong $450,000 to place into an investment account, which she had sole access to. Plenty to fund her dubious plans. Meanwhile, the U.S. Marshal Lone Star Fugitive Task Force was put into action to track down and apprehend the fleeing Armstrong. They had come to learn that the warrant they thought was invalid due to the erroneous date of birth was actually valid, and they could have indeed held Armstrong in custody on that warrant. They'd find out that she may have fled to her sister's home in New York. They tracked down her sister, Christine Armstrong, and paid her a visit. Christine shares that Kaitlin had indeed been there, but was gone. The day after Armstrong sold her car, she boarded a plane from Austin to New York, headed for her sister's. She stayed a few days, then Christine dropped her off at the Newark, New Jersey airport to board a plane back home to Austin. But later, Kaitlin called Christine and told her that she decided to drive the 1,700 miles or 2,700 kilometers back home instead of flying. Christine had not heard from her since. Authorities don't buy the driving back to Austin story. They checked for any outbound reservations for Kaitlin Armstrong but came up empty. But recalling that her sister said her passport was missing, they asked Homeland Security to check for any travelers traveling under the name Kaitlin Armstong. They got a match. A Kaitlin Armstong boarded a one-way flight to Costa Rica. Kaitlin Armstong had used her sister's passport to flee to Costa Rica. Armstrong arrived in Costa Rica with a head start evading authorities. They were tracking her down remotely based on intel, but would not arrive to the country for a month. By then, in addition to Armstrong's original murder charge, unlawful flight to avoid prosecution was added, and the reward for her capture was placed at $21,000. Intelligence revealed that Armstrong was staying in hostels in Costa Rica, which didn't narrow the scope very much since there are an overwhelming number of hostels in the country. They then received a tip that Armstrong had connected with an American businessman there, so they called him. He originally hung up on them, thinking they were either telemarketers or scammers. But after the third attempt, they were able to identify themselves as U.S. Marshals and explain that they were looking for a fugitive named Kaitlin Armstong. They sent him a picture of her while they stayed on the line. He confirmed that that was the person he met at a yoga studio in Hoko, but that it didn't look exactly like her and that she was going by the name of Beth. He told them they could find her at a particular yoga studio in Hoko. Detectives arrived in Costa Rica hopeful. They canvassed the Hoko area and sifted through hours of surveillance video, but they came up empty. Then they got one more lead. It was in a small village on the Pacific coast called Santa Teresa. The town was tiny and full of American tourists, many of whom, to the detectives' dismay, resembled Kaitlin Armstong. When detectives arrived, they immediately spotted several women who looked like they could possibly be her. It was going to be tougher than they thought. Detectives made numerous acquaintances and had people contacting them for any sightings. They encountered a local restaurant owner who hailed from New York. He knew Armstrong but said she went by Ari, one of the numerous aliases they discovered. She had told him that she was trying to establish herself there as a yoga teacher. The restaurant owner had noticed a bandage on her face, which she told him she got from being hit by a surfboard, a reasonable cause. But they still couldn't track down Armstrong. So detectives got clever. They placed several ads posing as a hostel looking for a yoga instructor. It seemed promising, but after a week of no responses, it was time to throw in the towel. They left the small town and returned to San Jose, preparing to head back to the States. But before they could actually head out, they got a hit on the ad. A yoga instructor who was working at a hostel in Santa Teresa said she was interested. So they rushed back to the small town and to the hostel where the yoga instructor was said to be staying. They sent in a single detective to avoid scaring her off and to get a good look at her to confirm her identity. He pretended to be a tourist, and to throw her off, he only spoke to her in Spanish. That required her to pull up Google Translate on her phone. So each time she would be reading her phone, the detective would take the opportunity to get a better look at her. She had a bandage on her nose and her lips looked bigger. But her eyes were identical. It was her. On June 29th, 43 days after Kaitlin Armstong led authorities on a manhunt, she was arrested. She would be extradited and returned to jail in Texas where, clearly a flight risk, she would be held on a $3.5 million bond. Turns out those bandages, the swollen lips, the hard time they were having finding her, was because she had started getting plastic surgery as soon as she arrived in Costa Rica. In addition to having cut and dyed her hair brown, Armstrong spent over $6,000 on cosmetic surgery. In a locker at the hostel she was staying at, along with her sister's passport, they found a receipt for both a nose job significantly altering the appearance of her nose, and a brow lift. Knowing she was a wanted woman, Armstrong tried to avoid taking the mandatory before and after photos, but the doctor performing the surgery insisted. Those photos would later be used in court, along with their conversations about her reluctance. 34-year-old Armstrong had used several fake names and stayed at various hostels to evade capture. She also began dating a man named Teal Ackerson. They went on a handful of dates, with Teal noting that Armstrong typically preferred to go to secluded places, which made sense to him once the truth was revealed. After he found out who she really was, he said that he had not recognized her from the photos put out by U.S. Marshals because she looked that different. While the spotlight was on the brazen fugitive who so callously murdered, then set out to protect her freedom in the most extreme manner possible, the focus deserved to be on the unique rising star whose life impacted so many around her. The cycling community and Mariah's friends and family mourned the tremendous loss of the woman who used whatever position she had to make a difference in whatever way she could. She wanted to do more than just win races.
Trying to figure out, like, how can I make this more than just about that? Like, how can I inspire people? How can I give back to the cycling community? How can I bring more people into the sport? How can I make it more inclusive? Like, whatever it may be, like, all that stuff is really important to me, I think. And like, I want to find meaning and purpose in cycling that goes like far beyond the result.
Her community mourned the unspeakable loss, the potential, the kindness, the person. On October 11, 2023, over a year after she was arrested and a few weeks before she was set to stand trial, Kaitlin Armstong escaped. She started by spending months vigorously training in her cell and throughout the facility, much of which was captured on jail video footage. Then she executed her meticulously planned escape by faking a leg injury that would get her from her jail cell to an outside doctor's office in town. Authorities believe she chose to fake a leg injury so that she wouldn't have to wear leg restraints. Once the appointment was over and they were walking out to the transport vehicle, she managed to bolt away from the two officers who were escorting her. She ran more than a block, then tried to scale a 6-foot wall, but failed. Officers were able to yank her back to the ground after her striped uniform pants slipped off while scaling the wall, revealing thermal pants underneath which she wore, planning to blend into a crowd once she escaped. The officers both sustained minor injuries to their arms and knees, resulting in a new felony charge of escape causing bodily injury. The charge would be dismissed a few days later. Kaitlin Armstrong's trial began on November 1, 2023. Prosecutors laid out a graphic timeline of events that led up to the deadly shooting, starting with Armstrong logging into Strickland's email and Instagram accounts, all the way up to her standing over Mo Wilson as she ended her life. They outlined her time on the run, including presenting the receipt for her plastic surgery, along with evidence of Google searches like, "Can pineapples burn your fingerprints?" and whether her phone could be tracked if she didn't make phone calls. All were consistent with her trying to evade capture. But defense argued that they had no direct evidence linking Armstrong to the murders. No one saw her committing the murder, surveillance footage never showed her entering or leaving, and they argued that the ballistic evidence was not definitive. They claimed their client was trapped in a nightmare of circumstantial evidence, and that law enforcement had a theory of what happened and sought out the evidence to fit it. They argued that the reason she fled and tried to disguise her identity was that she was scared of her boyfriend.
Do you think that she may have been concerned a little bit that her boyfriend had killed someone? Fear results in fight or flight. And it was flight.
Colin Strickland was called to testify and was less than accommodating. At a time when it was time to fight for justice for Mo, he was typically uncooperative and aloof on the stand, even described as arrogant. Most reports speculate due to his cycling career being over. Apparently frustrated, there were even instances where he was rude and aggressive to media, first shoving a cameraman's camera, almost making him drop it. Then later, going out of his way to step on the same cameraman's foot, which didn't imply any guilt but did not present well for Strickland, personally or professionally. After a 2-week trial and 2 hours of deliberation, the jury found 35-year-old Kaitlin Armstrong guilty. The same jury would convene to determine Armstrong's sentence. She had previously rejected a plea deal that would have reportedly shaved decades off on the potential life sentence if she were to receive one, potentially allowing her to leave prison in her 50s or 60s. Prosecutors urged the jury to sentence Armstrong to at least 40 years in prison. The jury returned the next day, handing down a sentence of a whopping 90 years in prison, well beyond the time recommended by the prosecutors. She was also fined $10,000. She will be eligible for parole after serving at least 30 of those years, in the year 2052. Her current release date is scheduled for July of 2112, when she would be 124 years old. Kaitlin Armstrong is currently serving out her sentence at Dr. Lane Murray Unit, a women's prison located in Gatesville, Texas. At the making of this video, it has been 6 months since she was sentenced, and little is known about her experience there. It is known that Murray is one of the many prisons in Texas in its unbearably hot summers that does not have air conditioning. So, there's that. A month after Armstrong was sentenced, her new attorney filed a motion for a new trial, claiming that her previous attorneys did not present enough character witnesses to demonstrate Armstrong's traumatic childhood. The motion also claimed that she was pregnant about the time she was arrested. Her new attorney claimed that had more witnesses testified about Armstrong's traumatic life, and had they known she was pregnant around the time she was arrested, her punishment might have been less severe. The court filing did not state who she was pregnant by, what happened to the pregnancy, or any evidence supporting it. Many speculated that it was yet another attempt by the convicted murderess to avoid facing the consequences of her selfish, brutal act. Colin Strickland has essentially vanished from the public eye. After extensive research, we couldn't find any evidence of whether he continues to race or not. But regardless, any public information about him during the 6 months that have passed since the sentencing is non-existent. A few months after Mo's death, at Kames Trails in East Burke, where Moriah spent so much time biking and skiing, a trail was built in her honor, called Moriah's Ascent. The trail was a collaborative effort from numerous diverse groups of volunteers who donated hundreds of hours to honor Mo. Also, to honor Moriah's memory, the Wilson family created the Moriah Wilson Foundation. They said, in her journal, she wrote that her mission was to inspire to ride bikes and be active, whatever that may look like. We want to do what Mariah didn't have the chance to do. What she had said about cycling, we now say about sustaining her legacy and impact in our community. We can't not do this. We hope this video did justice to Moriah Wilson. Mo's spirit and outlook were bigger than life. She used the power of what she had at her disposal, what some might consider a limited platform, and used any advances she fought to achieve to reach out to and bring in others in a meaningful way. Let's all be Mo. What are your thoughts about this case? About Mo, Colin, Kaitlin? Please share them in the comments below. And if you like how we presented this case, we thoroughly love it if you take a quick moment to hit like and share, and of course, hit subscribe to be notified about any future videos.